to Object Essay, where ideas they shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He is an author, consultant, as well as a fellow podcaster, none other than Mr. Roger Pearson. Welcome, Mr. Roger on Abstract Essay, and can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. So, Mr. Roger, would you
Yes.
please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Well, um, I'm in my 70s, so I've seen a lot of life. I've been in the business world for over 50 years, and for the last almost quarter decade, I've been working with small business peoples to teach them how to put together a proper business from a legal, logistical, and tax point of view.
Tax point of view. I like that. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Roger. And today let's talk about keeping more of your small business profits in your pocket.
But
Oh,
that's what
good.
everybody wants to do. But what I teach is primarily for the U.S. market, but I think the basic principles apply to anybody worldwide because no matter where you live in the world, the government wants part of your money. And what the large corporations do, of course, they hire uh, lots of accountants and lawyers and everything else to figure out how to keep as much of that away from the government. And small business people can do that the same way. They just have to know how, or they have to find somebody that knows how. So I teach people basically the three pillars of building a solid business foundation. And this is a subject that most small business people run away from. They don't want to spend the time, they don't want to educate themselves, and they end up losing a lot of money because of it. So the three pillars that really every business foundation sits on, no matter how small or how large you are, is number one, your legal formation. You know, what kind of legal format you have. The second one is how well you organize yourself and keep your books and all the other things you need to organize. And the third pillar is really taxation because we can't get away with it. You know, as they say, there's only two things you can't get away from: death and taxes. And that's true. And so, what I try to teach people is how these three things interconnect with each other. You change one, and you're going to change the other. How well you organize yourself is going to determine how well that you can reduce your tax liability because you have the proper records there to do it and the proper documentation to do it. How you change your legal format will change how you're taxed. The three, you can't change one without the other because they're all interconnected. And this is what I teach people.
Interesting. Interesting indeed, Mr. Rogers. So tell us, one of the biggest leaks is the owner underpaying themselves, leading to desperate profit taking later. What is the healthy, sustainable way to determine your own salary from the start?
Well, if you're working with an organization like the Internal Revenue Service for a small business person, whether they're a sole proprietor or whether they're an S corporation or a partnership, is that they like to see, especially in S corporations, because S corporations, the money that comes down on your K1, the profit sharing is not subject to payroll taxes, for instance, the Social Security and Medicare. They don't have to pay on that. And so if you don't take a salary, they consider that evasion of payroll taxes, and they can do some nasty things to you. And it's going to cost you a lot of money if you do that. So they say, on average, I mean, each industry has is only particular benchmarks, but on average, a small business person, say you're a small business person running an S corporation in this country, you should be paying yourself a salary of between 40 and 60% of your net profit.
Mm, interesting. And Mr. Roger, many business owners focus on top line revenue. How does flipping the script to prioritize profit from every single scale fundamentally change financial decision making?
Well, if all your yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people, all they do is they concentrate on how many dollars do I have coming in, and they forget about the back end. It's more important to focus on how much dollars are going out than how much money is coming in. Because unless you know what's going out, the coming in doesn't really matter. It doesn't have anything to balance itself with. And you're going to end up losing your business if you do that. You have to look at the entire picture. You have to look at what's going out even more than you have coming in. So if all you're looking at is gross revenue, you're doing yourself a big disservice and you're doing your business a big disservice. And you're going to end up losing money doing that.
How can calculating your own effective hourly rate reveal which money saving tasks are actually massive profit drains in disguise, Mr. Roger?
Well, I mean, the thing about it is, when it comes to taxes, you want the lowest possible net uh, uh, profit that you can on paper, anyway. That's why it's so important to keep organization properly, keep your proper records, because you have to deal with things like basis and depreciation and things like this. Uh, I tell people, eventually as you grow your business, you're going to have to probably hire an accountant. You're probably going to have to hire a tax a person, and a lot of people will hire an accountant and have them do their taxes. And I says, well, that's not necessarily a good idea. I have clients that I inherit from CPAs and accountants that have made a lot of mistakes along the way and have cost these people money, but they didn't know it because they were doing their taxes too, so they didn't really understand it. One of the things that so aggravates me, I think, and one of the reasons I wrote my book is because people will go out and they will hire a CPA or a tax person, and they won't interview them. They'll just say, "Well, Uncle Joe said, or they say an advertisement, or whatever the case may be." And I ask people this, and this is one of the major things that you should really think about is that I'm going to give you an example. If you hire a if you own a plumbing company, for instance, and you go to hire a plumber for your plumbing company, you would hire them to see if they knew anything about plumbing, wouldn't you? But
Yes.
how do you interview them if you don't know plumbing yourself? You wouldn't know if they knew what they were doing or not. And what so many people don't realize is that when you go hire somebody like an accountant or a tax professional to take care of part of your financials for your business, you need to be interviewing them. But how can you interview them if you don't know the business basics yourself? This is why I'm really so hot on this topic and why I'm trying to educate so many people on this. You don't need to become an expert. I couldn't imagine being an accountant. I think that would be one of the most boring things in the world to me. And people say, well, you're a tax professional, you're an enrolled agent and you're a tax professional and that's all numbers. And I says, no, taxes are not just numbers. I mean, you use numbers. Doing taxes is how to use the government's tax laws against the government to benefit your client. It's a game. And the better you get at the game, the more money you save. But if you're going to go out and hire that tax accountant and you're going to have to go out and hire the accountant, then you need to know the legal, the organizational, and the tax aspects to be able to properly interview them and to know if they're doing it right or not. You know, a lot of people, they'll take their books and they'll just drop them off to an accountant, and the accountant says, "Well, call me when they're done. I'll call you when they're done." And I tell people that if somebody says that to you, run away, because they don't give a damn about your business. They just want your money, and the taxes are a side business to them. You know, whoever does your taxes, you should be sitting down with at least twice a year during tax time, and again in the October November time frame before the end of the year. So if there's some adjustments that you can make in those final 2 or 3 months to save you money, you need to be talking to your tax professionals about that. So, but to do that, you have to study it yourself. You have to become somewhat knowledgeable yourself, or you're doing your business and yourself a disservice. And building business is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And so if you're going to do all that work, you might as well do it to the best of your ability, and don't ignore this part of it, even though it is boring as hell to you, because it'll come back and bite you. It really, really will. So, for instance, and a good tax professional can do amazing things for you if that knows all of this stuff. For instance, I had a client that she was a home chef, and she must be a very good home chef, because the first year she made $100,000 profit. That's amazing. And so she came into me, and we sat down and did the taxes, and she was just a sole proprietorship, and she was going to owe over $6,000 in additional taxes to the government. And she came to me in enough time that I could use one of the exceptions to the law, because when it comes to tax law, the person that knows the exceptions is the star. Because for every tax law, business tax law out there, there's an exception to it someplace. So that's why the corporations pay big bucks for all the EAs and things. So I was able to restructure her. And when I was done restructuring her, instead of a $6,000 bill, she got a $2,000 refund. That's what a good tax professional could do for you and advise you and help you do. But they have to know what they're doing, and not all of them do, especially these fly-by-night pop-ups that come up during tax time. So this is why you need to know. The other thing is like depreciation. Depreciation occurs when you buy equipment that has that over $2,500 has an extended life of more than 1 year. Well, instead of deducting the whole thing 1 year, you spread it out over 5, 7, 29 and a half or 39 years on commercial property. But a good tax professional can take the depreciation and play with it. And depreciation is section 179. And they say, okay, they're going to sit with you and they're going to get, well, where is your business heading? Are you going to be making more money this year and less money next year? You're going to be making more money. You got some big contracts coming up where you're going to need more deductions next year. Well, then they can take part of those expenses that you have and shift them into a future year where you're going to need those expenses more. These are the conversations you should be having with a tax professional. But how do you do that unless you know how to talk to them, and unless you know what they're talking about,
Interesting, Mr. Roger. Many owners are terrified of raising prices. What is the low risk way to test price increase that protects customer relationships while boosting the bottom line?
Ah, that's again, you can't get away with the economy the way it's going of raising prices. The only thing you can do is lower your expenses. And so that's why when I said earlier, it's so important to know what you're spending, what's going out more than what's coming in. I mean, you have to have a profit margin, a certain profit margin to make a business. The lower your profit margin, the more business you have to make to compensate for it. So it's a yin and yang type of thing. So you really can't do anything about raising prices other than changing vendors, And it's something you constantly have to be aware of what your costs are. Those are more. It's more important to keep track of your cost than your end result. So once you know what your cost is, what you have that solid, then you can decide what your retail price is going to be on your services or your products. So that's why I say the back end is more important than the front end.
How does focusing on customer lifeline value over a simple transaction profit change how much you're willing to spend to acquire and refrain customer, Mr. Roger?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would say I'm not a total expert on marketing. I will admit that. Um, I am. I work the back end. I work the legal, the taxes, and the net profits, and all of that stuff. But it's how much you spend to get a customer. You can't spend more than you're going to make. You know, and there are so many ways to market yourself out there. I think that one of the depending what you're in, if you're in a services business, then of course a lot of it is word of mouth, and the majority of it is good word of mouth. Your reputation is everything when it comes to that. When it comes to retail products, it's a little more dicey because most retail products you have several vendors that will upend the market. One of them, when Amazon came along, it just upended the markets all across the country, and it's still to some extent doing that. But you have to be careful when you're shopping there because sometimes they are not the cheapest place to go. It could be one of the most important um, or most expensive places to go. So, again, how much do you spend to market to acquire a client? I don't think there's any one definitive answer that you can give that. It depends on your service and your retail. And if you're spending $10 to make $2, obviously that's not important. So you basically have to keep track of that. When I talk about organizational stuff, knowing your organizational stuff, knowing your paperwork. That's one of the things you have to keep track of. Am I losing money by doing this particular type of marketing? If I am I spending more than I'm getting back? If you don't organize yourself well enough to keep track of those type of things, you're going to put yourself out of business.
Mr. Roger, mindset and long term wealth. How do you help business owners understand the critical difference between having a cash in the bank and generating true sustainable profit?
Well, everybody should have some cash in the bank. You know, most you look at most business books and things like that. They say if you're going to go into the business, you should have 12 months worth of operating expenses in the bank before you go into business. Unfortunately, a lot of people have maybe 3 months, and that's why there's such a error. There's such a failure rate in excess of 70% for small businesses because they don't prepare themselves for that. You really have to have that. The other thing is, you just can't have the cash in the bank. If you have cash in the bank, it should be working for you. You should have it in high interest accounts and things like that so it can work for you. You should never have idle funds anywhere other than a 30-day operating cash in the bank. If you have more than 30 days operating cash, I'd advise you to put into high interest bearing accounts at the very least so you have access to it when you need it. If you have a bad month, you need some extra cash, but have it work for you. I think that's one of the most important things you can do for yourself.
Interesting, Mr. Roger. And can you walk us through a practical system for automatically allocating revenue to profit owners' pay and taxes before paying operating expenses?
Ah, so generally, generally, I mean, what what the owner pays themselves is probably the last thing that's going to happen after all those other things because you've got to base that on your net profit. If you don't have any net profit, it's pretty hard to pay yourself. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they will pay themselves before they take care of the basics of business and vendors and everything else. And that's why you see a lot of bankruptcies and everything else going on in this country. And that's unfortunate. Um, but I think, as far as taxes go, taxes, the end result for taxes is that you want to have the lowest possible on paper net profit. And that can be done in different ways, depending on what legal format you're in, how you use depreciation and basis, and a lot of other factors can determine what your net profit for taxes are. What a lot of people don't realize is that net profit for taxes is different than net profit book, or what they call book net profit, accounting net profit. Those are two different things, the way the tax laws are written. And that confuses a lot of people. So, and like I said, as what you pay yourself is probably the last when you after you pay all of your other bills. So,
Can you share a story of business you work with that was a revenue rich but profit poor, and was the key change that unlocked significant profit retention, Mr. Roger?
wow, I've worked with a lot of different businesses. And I think one of the things that I've learned is for me to do a good job for my clients is I have to learn their business. So I've had to learn the painting business and landscape business and construction business, and they go on and on. But the things you have to realize is you have to set yourself a goal also for what you want. For instance, I had a client. He was owned a paint company. When he first came to me, it was just him. He was going out, he's getting bids, and he was doing paint jobs, painting houses, basically exteriors. And over the years, over a period of 10 years, he grew it from just himself doing it to he had 10 crews out there and doing over $1 million a year in sales. And that was amazing. But along the way, he said he wanted to buy a particular house that he was living in. And when you work for yourself, it's hard to get the bank to lend you money to buy even a house, even though it's secured by real estate. And to get the type of loan he wanted, he had to have his income within a particular range each year for 3 years. And he sat down and we worked out a plan to where we gave him, this is what you got to do to be in the profitability in these years, as far as your income, as far as your outgo, as far as depreciation and running your basis and your section 179s and all the other little tricks that you can use. And we accomplished that, and he was able to buy his house. You have to plan for the long term as well as the short term, and if you do that, you'll do okay.
Mr. Roger, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season. Abstract Poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Roger, if a business owner is overwhelmed, what is the single most impact profit audit they can do this week to find immediate savings?
Is overwhelmed? If somebody is overwhelmed, there's two
Yeah.
options you have. You need to educate yourself to find out why you're overwhelmed, or you need to find somebody to help you figure that out.
Definitely, Mr. Roger Pearson. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world and hoping for more and more empowering business advocacy to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your books, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Well, I have a free brochure on the 3 pillars of business, like I was talking, at seagulltechnologies.com/free. If you're interested in my books, it's at seagulltechnologies.com/books, and it'll take you to the right place.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Roger Pearson because if you support him, also more and more empowering books to come, more and more empowering advocacy for the business itself. So, Mr. Roger, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it.
More to come, people. See you soon.